Welcome to Veritus Group's webinar, Finding the Hidden Problem in Your Major Gift Program. Today's webinar features Jeff Schreifel, Senior Partner at Veritus Group. Jeff has a rich fundraising background and he engages with hundreds of leaders and gift officers throughout the world. He's also viewed countless donor file assessments over the years and deeply understands the challenges facing our sector today. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, thanks, Karen, and thank you all for being on this webinar. I'm really excited to be here with you today because I believe what we talk about today will help you tremendously figure out how well your donor file is performing for major gifts and what you can do about it to make it even better. So here are some of the objectives for this webinar today. We're going to discuss some of the significant problems that have caused the nonprofit sector to lose their way. And we're going to understand why value and donor attrition are occurring in your donor file. And then we're going to answer the 8 questions that will help you identify where you need to focus to address attention at your organization to address the attrition that's going on in your file, and then learn how a donor file assessment can help you identify key information about the health of your own pipeline. So those are the 4 objectives. So let's get into it and let's start talking about value and donor retention. So all of us pretty much in our industry in the nonprofit world knows about donor retention. And also, if you've been following for years, you know that donor retention has been a huge issue in our industry because it's been declining. In the last 5 years, we've seen it go from 50% donor retention to down to 41% donor retention. And it's a huge problem in our industry, and everyone is trying to figure out how do we retain donors. On the other side, the commercial end, they're doing a much better job of identifying their customers and keeping their customers. We're not doing such a great job in the nonprofit world. And so there's a lot of room for improvement on our end to be able to hold on to donors, but not only hold on to donors, but hold on to the value of those donors. So there's a difference between donor attrition and donor value attrition. Donor attrition is when a donor gives 1 year and they stop giving the next year. Donor value attrition is when a donor gives, let's say, $10,000 1 year, and the next year they give $5,000. They've lost 50% of their value from year to year. And many nonprofits don't look at donor value attrition. So this is what it looks like in just any kind of giving file. You can see a donor, number 5 here, gave $10,000 in year 1. And by the end of year 4, they are now giving $3,500. So we retain the donor, yet their value has gone down over time. And in a major gift program, we want that value to either maintain or go up over time. So that's what donor value attrition is. Here's another way to see it. This is one caseload of an actual caseload of 150 donors. It was a very strong caseload of $1.9 million of value. So in year 1, all of these donors gave $1.9 million. The next year, the same donors only gave $776,000. And then the year after that, down to $584,000. So in just 3 years, the donors went from $1.9 to $584,000 in revenue. The same donors lost almost 70% of their value over that time period. 70%. That's donor value attrition over a whole caseload. Here's another way to look at it. So most nonprofit leaders, development directors, when they look at the strength of their major gift program, they're looking at view number 1. So focus on view number 1 for a second. Year 1, that major gift program brought in $2.5 million. This is all from donors 1,000 plus cum and above. So 2.5. The next year, 3.1 million. So this program grew 21% in just 1 year. So If you're the executive director, board of directors, you're the development director, you're jumping up and down going, yes, we had a great year. We grew by 21%, and that is great. However, let's peel the onion back a little bit and find out why it grew and what happened with those donors in year one. So in view 2, this is how we at Veritus like to look at these, at the results here. So those donors that gave the 2.5 million, what did those same donors give in year 2? And you can see that those same donors gave actually 49% less than they did in year 1. It went from 2.5 million to the 1.3 million. 49% in 1 year. The only reason the file grew by 21% was because new donors hitting that 1,000 Q mark came in and masked the behavior of the donors in the prior year. So we grew, yes, by 21%, but those donors that gave in year 1 to year 2, we lost 49% of their value. And I will guarantee that most nonprofit leaders never look at their file this way. They look at that growth and say, hey, everything's doing well. We look at this and going, yeah, it's great that you grew, but you could have grown much more had you been paying attention to those donors in year 1. So that's value attrition. Excuse me. So why is this happening? And quite simply, this is why we believe we're seeing all of this donor value attrition going on, is because we're not cultivating, stewarding, or serving our major donors correctly. Because if we would serve those donors the way they should be, we wouldn't be seeing those high value attrition rates. So I have put together 8 questions that if you cannot answer yes to on every 8, it could be a reason why you are seeing value attrition at high rates in your own donor files. So I want to go through these 8 questions, because if you can answer yes, then you should have very low donor value attrition. Okay, so here's the first question. Do you have a culture of philanthropy and major gifts in your organization? Do you have that? And what I mean by that is, does everyone in your organization, from the CEO down to the person at the front desk that greets people when they come into your office, do they understand the role that donors play in your organization? Do they know that donors are as much a part of your mission as what you do every day to make the world a better place? Do they understand that donors are the fuel, are part of that mission every day? And do they understand the role of major gifts? Does the CEO know that they have to be a part of that? That major gifts is essential. It's part of that donor pipeline, and that you can do acquisition well and cultivation well, but if you don't have a donor major gift program, you're going to stagnate. Does everyone understand that in your organization? So that's the first question. Do you have a culture of philanthropy in that organization? The next question is, does your major gift program have a structure to it? We call it the Veritus way of major gifts. And quite simply, it's this. Do you have qualified donors, no more than 150 donors per MGO? In other words, do you have donors in your file that actually want a relationship with you? Not just because they've hit a threshold of what you deem a major gift, but do they actually want a deeper relationship? Have you had two-way communication with the donor to know that they want that relationship with you? Many major gift officers are tearing their hair out because they have bloated caseloads of donors who don't want to be in a major gift program. They don't want to be talked to. They don't want to be reached out to. Yet major gift officers are trying over and over again to get a hold of them, and they can't do it because these donors aren't really qualified. So, are they qualified? That's number one. Do you have revenue goals attached to every donor in your portfolio? And are they cash flowed? Meaning, do you know when that gift is going to come in during the year? So that you know exactly every month how much is expected in revenue. And then next, do you have a strategy for every donor with monthly touch points? So you have a revenue goal attached to a donor, and then for every donor, you have a strategy for the next 12 months on how you're going to achieve that goal. This is important because if you don't have a goal, there's nothing to attain to. And if you don't have a strategy on how to achieve that goal, you're going to be all over the place. You're going to be rudderless. You need that structure. Then is your portfolio tiered A, B, and C level? So if you have 150 donors in a portfolio, your A levels, there's probably about 20 to 25 in the A, then B, then C. Do you have that broken out? The reason for doing this is so that you can focus your time and energy correctly and know that most of your time, or at least half of your time, is going to be spent with your A level. Why? Because those 20 to 25 donors are going to bring in over half of your overall value of the caseload. So are they tiered? And do you have long-term revenue goals for your donor? In other words, what is your vision for your donors, especially your A-level donors? Where do you want to take that donor in year 1 through 5? It's really important that you have a vision for your donors, okay? So this is what I mean. Does your major gift program have a structure to it? All right, next. Are you reporting back impact to your donors? And do they know that they're making a difference with their gifts? You probably have heard this. You got to report back impact. But how many nonprofits are actually doing this right? Very few, unfortunately. And it's so important because we know in survey after survey of donors, the #1 reason they leave an organization is because they never heard back how their gift made a difference. I've got a story for you. So a couple of years ago, I got a call from a CEO of one of the organizations we worked with a while back. And he said, Jeff, I want to tell you the story. And I'm telling you this story because I messed up. But I want you to tell other people this story so they don't. Excuse me. Here's what happened. So Bob, who's the CEO of an organization, about a $5 million organization. So not huge, but not super small, medium size. He's out to lunch with a donor at a diner, and they're having a conversation, and he notices another donor when he was getting up to leave. And so he goes over to the other donor and it says, hey, John, I haven't seen you in a long time, and how are things going? And he could tell that there was something not right with this donor. Like he sensed, that he was a little off. And so he probed a little further. He goes, hey, is everything okay? And the donor kind of looks down. He's like, well, I didn't want to say anything, but, I gave a pretty significant gift about 6 months ago, and I got a receipt in the mail, but I never heard back on anything about that gift. And Bob was like, oh my gosh, I really don't know anything. Let me go back to the office and find out what happened. Bob goes back to the office. He goes, I'm out there. I see John. He said he gave us a significant gift and he's never heard back from us. And his staff was like, oh, they're like, he gave during the holiday season, it was a $20,000 gift, which for this organization is a pretty big gift. And, it's been so busy, we have not been able to get back or talk about what happened with this gift. So, Bob was like, I can't believe this. So, obviously he said, let's put a report together, all this stuff. So he calls the donor after he gets the report, says, we're sending the report over to you. I have to apologize. This got lost. We lost our way, and I'm really sorry. And this is what the donor says back to him. He said, Bob, I don't want you to feel too bad. The time I gave you that $20,000 gift, I also gave seven other organizations, so that 8 organizations, a $20,000 gift. Or was it 8? It was not, it was 10 organizations, 10 organizations. So 200,000 total. He gave a gift to 8 organizations, 20,000 each. Of the 10 organizations that I gave, only one organization, one, told me how my gift made a difference. And he said, the one that got back to me was from a food pantry in West Virginia, run by an 80-year-old woman who wrote me a 7-page letter, handwritten, about what she did with my $20,000. So, you know what he did next year? He gave them, that one food pantry, a $200,000 gift. It is so important to report back the impact of your gift to a donor. So, the fourth question, are you thanking the donor appropriately? Now, you might be thinking, well, of course, that's a no-brainer. You know, they get the thing in the mail, and unfortunately, we don't do well at this. So I have another story for you. A couple years ago, I was on a plane from Dallas to Midland, Texas. In Midland, Texas, if you've ever been there, all it is flat land and oil wells. So I get on the flight, and it's a small little plane. Comes sitting next to me, this big guy, jeans, shirt, you know, he's got the, and kind of dirty. His fingernails are all dirty. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, this guy must be in the oil business because he's flying out there and he kind of looks the part. And so he sits down, and this guy's really chatty. So he's like talking to me, and he says, by the way, what do you do? And I said, well, I help nonprofits develop mid and major gift programs. He's like, oh, major gifts. He said, you know, I've made a few of those in my day. And I'm thinking, oh man, first of all, never judge a book by the cover, right? So here I'm now sitting next to a philanthropist, and I get an hour with him on this flight, and I am like, this is the greatest thing ever, right? So I said to him, so I got to ask you, what has been your experience giving large gifts out to organizations? What's your experience been like? And he's like, you know what? No one has ever asked me that question. But he thought about it. He goes, you know what? I've got a good experience and I've got a bad experience. And I said, wow, okay, well, tell me the bad experience first. I want to hear this. So here's his experience. He gave a $1.5 million gift to his wife's alma mater, who he loved as well. $1.5 million, but here's what he gave it to. It's very specific. He gave $1.5 million to help build the wide receivers coaches office space for a new athletic complex at the university. Pretty specific. So I'm like, what is about the wide receivers coaches thing? Tell me about that. And he said, well, when I was in high school, I played wide receiver and I had the time of my life. He said, I wasn't the best, but I look back at that time so fondly, and I just loved being on that team and being a wide receiver. And that's what I wanted to give the gift to. I said, okay, that makes sense. I said, well, why is that a bad experience? He said, Jeff, I gave $1.5 million and I never heard back from them, except I got a letter in the mail thanking me for the $1.5 million. I said, wait a minute. You gave $1.5 million and all you got was a letter? No one called you and said, hey, come on down to the university? He goes, no. In fact, I was down there for business. And so I called them to say, hey, could I come and see what I helped fund? And they were like, oh yeah, of course, come on down, we'll set you up. So he goes to the university himself, and they put some freshman person, kid to show him around the complex. No coaches were there to thank him, nothing. And there he was, just sitting. He goes, I felt just awful about the whole experience. And he said, Jeff, to tell you the truth, after that, I took them out of our estate plan. Had they been in my estate plan, they would have seen millions of dollars coming their way. But because of that experience, they're out. They're out. And then I said, well, tell me now about the good one. He goes, same number gift. I gave $1.5 million to my local veterans organization to help them build a new community center for veterans in my community. I said, why was this so good? He said, well, let me tell you, I got 5 letters from the board of directors, from the CEO, but from 3 of the veterans themselves, thanking me for this gift. And he said, Jeff, I'm not someone that cries very easily, but when I got these letters, I couldn't control it. I was just so touched by the words of appreciation and how they cared about what was happening. And then he said, and that wasn't the only thing. Then they had the whole unveiling of the thing. So they had open ribbon cutting thing. They invited me and my entire extended family from all around. They all came, and it was just an amazing experience. And I felt so good. And now what happens is the CEO calls me or writes me, or email at least once a month, just kind of asking me my thoughts. I go down there and talk to the guys. Once a month, I just go down there and just show my appreciation. And it's the best experience. And when I die, they're not going to believe how much money I've left them. So that story from one donor tells me donors want to be thanked appropriately. You don't have to be out crazy about it, but they want to be thanked for what they give. So just not thanking appropriately, that university lost millions of dollars. All right, here's the other question. Number 5, is leadership engaged with your major donors? In other words, does the CEO go with you to donor meetings? Do they understand the importance, how important it is to be in front of donors? Are they afraid to ask? Are they engaged with donors? You want them, they have to be engaged. And the reason for that is because donors who want to give significant gifts want to be in touch with the head of the organization. So it's very important that your leadership is engaged with major donors, that she really wants to go with you and support you in your major gift efforts. This is very, very important. 6th, is the strength of your pipeline that feeds major gifts strong? So do you have a mid-level program? Do you have mid-level officers? Do you look at how to take from a donor who comes in as acquisition, how to make it as easy as possible for that donor to reach major gifts and plan giving? And what does that look like in your donor file? Most nonprofits have yet to start develop their mid-level programs. Some are starting to do it, and that's great news because we're working with some of them doing that. But having a strong mid-level program that's feeding qualified donors into major gifts is one of the best investments you can do, because major gifts always is wanting new major donors to come into their program. You're only going to be able to do that on a consistent basis by having that mid-level program that you're really trying to move those donors up. So having a strong mid-level program and that pipeline into major gifts is so important, because your major gift program won't continue to grow unless you are always feeding new people into those portfolios. So good, strong mid-level program. Number 7, are your major gift fundraisers asking for gifts? Now you might be thinking, well, of course they are. Isn't that what a major gift fundraiser does? Well, you would think so. But being in this world for so long, you would not believe how many major gift officers have never really truly asked a donor for a significant gift. They've done great on stewarding people, sending gifts, taking them out for lunch, and then they've relied on direct mail or the donor just doing it themselves, or, well, that donor just gives every November, like clockwork. I never have to ask. And what we see then are files full of donors who give the same amount every year. Now, it's great that they're giving, but these are donors who are giving, let's say, $5,000 every year or $10,000 every year. Yet they could be making $50,000, $100,000, $250,000 gifts, which they are giving somewhere else because no one's ever asked them for a gift. Just yesterday, I was with an organization. If I told you the name of this organization, you'd be like, everyone knows it. Very well respected. They do incredible work. I sat with them. The number one thing they said, our major gift officers really haven't asked for a gift. If you looked at their donor file, you'd see why. Donors, loyal donors, giving the same amounts every year. Why? Because the major gift officers, they've had a culture for many years of never really asking donors. They've done a great job, doing the stewardship stuff, but never really asking the donor to do more. So these donors who they've got on their file that are giving consistently are giving hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars to other organizations, not theirs. It's amazing, but this is important. And the 8th and final question is, do you have a system in place to keep major gift fundraisers focused and accountable? And what I mean by that, are you as a manager, or if you're an MGO, is your manager meeting with you on a consistent basis? And what we do is work with folks every week. We're talking to the people that we're working with every week to make sure that they're getting the right strategy, that they're staying focused and accountable to the goals that they've set for these donors, and are they working their plan? For all the years that we've been working at Veritus in this is the secret to major gift success, is having that system in place of accountability. Because when that happens, major gift fundraisers make their goals. It's amazing, but they do. So having that system in place where there's regular check-ins, that you know exactly what is happening with your staff is imperative for growth overall. Those
Jeff,
are the
I'm going to jump in here real quick, just a reminder. I know you're getting ready to go back to the data for a little bit. And we've got some great questions coming in the chat box, question box. Everyone keep sending those my way because we're going to take those in just a little while. This is great, Jeff. I love these stories. I've heard them a million times and I love it every time. So good.
Okay. All right. So let's take a deeper dive into the data. Okay. So we can see what this looks like on a real donor file. So this is a real donor file. Now you might be saying, oh my gosh, this is a huge organization. Just take off, an extra 0 here. So this is a $20 million major gift program. It could be a $2 million one or a $200,000 one. It's the same idea. This organization from year 1 to year 3 grew by 17% in 3 years. So pretty reasonable growth. In fact, they were pretty happy with this. When we presented this to the CEO, they felt pretty good about a 16.71% growth over year 1 to year 3. So he said, okay, this is your bottom line numbers. Now, let's look at individuals by class year, meaning the year that they gave that $1,000 plus gift, and then what are they subsequently giving? So you can see the donors in year 1 gave 10.5 million. By year 3, those same donors were giving 7.5 million, or we lost 29% of their value in just those 2 years. And then the next class year, 3.1 million. Those same donors the next year only gave 1.7 million. They lost 44% of their value in just that 1 year, okay? So year one lost 29, year one donors lost 29% of their values in 2 years. Year two lost 44% of its value in 1 year. Then, yep. And so then we looked at, okay, what does it look like by donor? So you can see, look at the donor that gave 51,000. The next year 1,000, next year 1,000, next year gave 4,500. What happened? What's the story behind that donor? What's the story behind the donor that gave 50,000 and then stopped giving? That's the question we had for folks, and they didn't have an answer to. This is what value attrition looks like in a file. So then we looked at organizations, similar pattern. Year one, $8.9 million. The same donors by year three gave 6.2 million. We lost 30% of their value. Year two, 3.1 million. The next year, those same donors gave 1.9. They lost 39% of their value in 1 year. Now, when you add it all up, individuals and organizations, of what did we lose over this time period, it totaled $9.1 million to value attrition. So when the CEO saw this, they were like blown away, like, whoa, here we are. Now remember, I'm going to go back to this. Remember, they grew by 17% from year one to year three, yet they lost $9.1 million to value attrition. Now, there's always going to be some value attrition going on, but not at that level. In fact, in managed caseloads, we see no more than 6 to 10% of value attrition going on. So the CEO rightly was like, gosh, what if we could recoup 25, even 50% of that 9.1 million? How much more revenue we could have for our programs? Exactly. That is the exact question. How can we reduce that value attrition that's going on? And we also looked at donor attrition. Now look at the bottom line total numbers. They grew from 3,500 donors to 5,286 donors, almost 5,300 donors. They grew by 50% in the number of donors. Yet, when you break it down, those year one donors, by year three, we lost 28% of them. No, yeah, 28%. The year two donors lost 37% of those donors. They had no idea, because all they were looking at is, oh, we're growing our donor base. Why did those donors stop giving? They didn't have an answer. Remember when I was talking that never get asked? Like in a donor file. Donors loyal because they believe in the mission, yet they're only giving the same amount because no one's ever asked them to do anything else. Even at this level, at 25,000, and I've seen it at 100,000. Scores of donors every year give the same amount. When you ask, what's the story behind them? They don't know. Why? Because they don't know those donors. If you don't know your $25,000 a year donor, that's a problem. And this is what you'll have. Good loyalty, but these donors, I guarantee you, are giving 100,000, 500,000 somewhere else. Why? Because somebody is spending the time to figure out what their passions and interests are and matching that up to the programs and projects that they're passionate about. That's what it's going to take to move that $25,000 donor up. We also look at things, what percentage of the file is small gifts versus large gifts? What is your wealth indicator analysis? So here's a list of all 10 million plus people who have the capacity to do 10 million plus. Yet you can see some of these donors are giving way under that kind of capacity, and they have no idea. We also look at performance by major gift officer. How are they performing year over year? And we can also look at transformational type of donors, donors that have the capacity and are yet producing way under that capacity, what could we do to move them beyond that? So the way you figure this out is by doing a major donor assessment, and you can do this for free. You can do this for yourself, or you can have us do it for free. So why would we do this for free? It's because, first of all, we want you to have great information about your donors, because if you can figure this out, this will help you launch more questions. It help you answer those 8 questions and gives you a reason to want to change the way you're doing major gift fundraising. Excuse me, because there's plenty of revenue out there that you're probably letting go because you're not cultivating those donors well. The second reason is it, of course, allows us at Veritus to tell you what's happening in your donor file, where we think there's areas of opportunity, and how Veritus might be able to help you take it to another level. That's why. So you might be asking, well, what do you guys do besides these free webinars? Well, we help organizations create, build, and manage major gift programs, mid-level programs, and plan giving programs. And we work with you to build that structure that I talked about that will help you deepen relationships with donors. And we keep major gift fundraisers focused and accountable to strategies and goals. And the result of this is that you're going to reduce donor and value attrition. You're going to increase your caseload values, will exponentially increase your major gift revenue. Your MGOs will be successful, donor relationships are strengthened, and there'll be a lot more joy going around in your organization because of it. I don't know if you joined our session a couple of weeks ago with, I had on Ruth Ann Daly, who is the VP of Philanthropy at American Cancer Society. 3 years ago, we did this assessment for them. And because of that, they decided they wanted to come work with us to help them put a structure to their major gifts. We did all of that. In 3 years, they doubled their major gift revenue from 27 million to 56 million, more than doubled their revenue. 3 years, they took their major gift program and doubled their revenue. And all they did was stick to this program, have us help them come alongside of their major gift officers, keep them focused and accountable, and great things happen. And that's just one story, because we have scores of other organizations that we worked with that do the same thing. If they maintain that discipline and focus and accountability, they see significant results. So how does the assessment work? So we will send you a donor select criteria instructions sheet. You'll get a link to it on an email after this. We'll verify that the data is correct once we get the data that we need, and then our analyst performs an assessment. That takes about 10 working days. And then we set up a meeting via GoToMeeting or Zoom, or we'll come in person, as I did yesterday, and we'll show you the whole data, and we'll give you a 5-year revenue projection. And once we do that, we'll send you the assessment and the presentation, and we'll ask if we can send you a proposal. But there is absolutely no obligation to work with us. But I will promise you that you will find the assessment compelling, because we've done hundreds of them, and every organization that has gone through it has been amazed by what they found out about their donor file. So with that, Karen, let's take some questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. That was really interesting. I've got a number of questions coming through here. One thing I wanted to ask is that 5-year projection. What do I get from that? How does that help me if I do the assessment?
How does it help you?
Yeah.
Well, it helps you in a couple ways. One, it will show you actually how many individuals do you actually need? What does the data say that supports staffing? That's one thing. But it gives you a vision for how you can actually grow the program, so that you can convince leadership that says, we need to invest in major gifts, because here we are. If we invest X, Y, Z, we could be here in 5 years. This would mean so much more for our programs.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
Very good clarification. So I've got a question here from Rebecca, and you all just keep popping them in to the question chat box. What if the majority of your major donors are giving to events only?
Well, unfortunately, that happens a lot. A lot of organizations, especially over COVID, had donors that gave over events. COVID happened, and then they were stuck. What we would recommend is to try to move them over into more one-to-one type of relationships. And so with those donors that give those type of gifts, I would definitely qualify those donors to see if they actually want a deeper relationship outside of the events. And you will find some that do. Unfortunately, event donors typically are like stuck on the event. They're not actually adhering, or they don't actually necessarily resonate with the mission so much, but they're going and they're giving because they feel pressure from friends, or they buy a table, or anything other than the actual mission of why they're giving. And so, but there are some of those that if they are only event donors, some of them can be converted into donors that actually want a deeper relationship with you.
So you talk a lot about events not being our ideal approach to major gifts. Are you saying we shouldn't do events? Are you saying we should do events but then qualify donors into major gifts? What should people be doing now because events are still limited?
Yeah, I would look at events as outside of the fundraising realm and more as brand building, as cultivation events for a major donor, but to use it as the way that you're bringing in philanthropic dollars um, will not lend yourself long-term relationships with that donor. And so you can use events again to cultivate donors, but if that's your only means of raising funds, um, it's not a long-term solution, and it's a costly solution. So the ROI on events, compared to having an individual major gift program, is not even comparison. I mean, if you're breaking even or doing a 2-to-1 on an event, great. But major gifts is where your net revenue comes in. That's where you're bringing in 8, 10, 12, 20 to 1. So trying to convert those donors in by qualifying them into a major gift program is what you should do with those donors. And have a separate major gift program where events is separate from fundraising. I wouldn't even look at events as a real fundraising tool.
That's helpful. A similar question coming from Joanne is, we have a membership program. So talk a little bit about how that plays into all of this.
Well, I mean, we worked with an organization in New York that had a membership program. They were an arts organization, and they had a major gift membership giving amount. So in other words, if you gave at that certain level, I think it was like $6,500, you were a member, but you were kind of considered a major donor. Yet they never asked these donors anything more than what they gave at their membership level until we came to work with them and to help them realize that these donors had huge capacity, and they started developing relationships with these people beyond just the membership. And they started seeing gifts in $50, $100, $250,000 gifts from donors who have been members for decades and never given much more than just the membership gift. Why? Because no one ever asked them before. They were just happy to get them to renew the membership, not to develop a relationship with the donor. That's what major gifts is about. It's about understanding the donor's passion and interests as it relates to all the programs and projects your nonprofit is doing to fulfill its mission. When you bring that together, that's when you start seeing real philanthropy. Everything else is just it's just a transaction.
So membership programs are not necessarily wrong. They can be a
No,
way to get people in
no,
the door, but then you want to make sure you're building the relationship,
that's
interesting,
right.
connecting them in meaningful ways, and asking additional
That's right.
amounts of connecting. Yes. Okay, cool. It's so fun. On our live calls with our Veritus Gift Academy, a lot of folks are like, are you saying these are bad? We're like, no, they're not
No,
bad, but they
we're
have
not
a
saying they're
place,
bad, but
but they
don't
limit.
rely on
They
them as a
limit.
crutch, right?
Yes, they limit.
That's what it becomes. These membership programs, they become a crutch. So I don't have to ask the donor because they know they're going to get their membership renewal notice in the mail. And we're just happy that they renew. Well, no, these donors could do so much more. We need to get to know them and start asking them for larger gifts. And they will give beyond the membership.
Thank you, Jeff. James says, I always love Veritas presentations. Thank you! Exclamation mark. Can your assessments be run on major giving in Canada? What about other
Yes,
countries
absolutely.
other than the US?
We work with a number of organizations in Canada. Yes.
So talk about, are there differences in fundraising in different countries and cultures? How does the Veritas way work across the board? Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, it does. It works across the board because we're all this is all dealing with donor relationships and building those relationships over time. So it crosses all cultures. Now, there might be some different nuances on approaches and asking abilities and all those kind of things, but generally the same structure that we put into place, the idea of building relationships, is across all cultures.
Thank you. I know we have folks that work in England, and we have a qualifying process with an intro letter, and we have 7 steps you go through to really see if someone's interested in connecting in a more meaningful way with your
Yeah,
organization. I know they tweak the letters to be a little different in their tone and their approach just because it fits the culture better than the letters that we have as templates. So yes, tweaking, but the systems work across the board.
exactly. Mm-hmm.
There's a question about the goal piece. So talk a little bit about how you're setting individual goals with donors, and what if they're not qualified? Like, how do you know what goal to set for each donor?
Well, if they're not qualified, they wouldn't be in a portfolio and you would not set a goal for them. Once they're qualified, then you would set a goal. So the goal if you've never set goals before, you would look at the donor's giving behavior over the last several years. And quite honestly, you make your best guess based on their giving behavior and what you know about that donor or not. And set a goal and see how that plays out. And then every year that you do goal setting, it gets better and more refined. So if this is the first time you're ever setting goals, the best way to do that is to look at your previous giving behavior by each donor. So you can understand their capacity, how often they give, all of those things, and then set a reasonable goal that's going to be, a little higher, because now you're spending time with that donor. So if a donor was giving 5,000, let's say, every year, and they were just doing it on their own, no one had ever asked them a gift, well, now you have the opportunity to get in front of them and understand them. Why wouldn't you put a goal as 7,500 or 10,000? Because now you're really going to be able to know who that donor is, what their passions and interests are, and you're going to relate something that they really want to fund.
So yes, we don't want to set goals and tell they're qualified, but my boss wants a goal next week for my caseload, and it's going to take me 6 months to qualify 150 people. So how do I set it with unqualified donors until I get them qualified and know a little bit more about them?
Well, you're just taking a guess. I mean, I don't know. I'd look at, what did all those donors last year give? So if you really had to do a goal right now, even though you're not doing it the correct way, I'm not saying you are doing it the correct way, but it isn't the way it should be done. And I get it, because managers first of all, you're dealing with somebody that doesn't really understand major gifts. But if they're saying you have to come up with a goal, I would look at what did all the donors currently in that caseload bring in last year, and then make a decision on what type of goal, what percentage of goal overall above it. That's how most nonprofits actually do it. They look at, oh, you brought in $1 million. Well, next year, I want you to bring in 10% more or 20% more. That is the wrong way to do it, but that is how most nonprofits do this, because it's not donor-centered at all. So if you're being pressed to give a goal and you have no real way to do it right, then that's how I would do it.
Thanks. Question here about, you mentioned long-term planning, 1 to 5 years for a donor. How do you go about that? What is that about?
It's so the same way you go about setting goals for every donor. You're also, for sure, on the A-level folks, you're thinking about this donor. Okay, this year my goal for the donor is 25,000. I know that this donor, he's been a donor like for 3 years now, and he's given 15, 20,000. So my goal is 25 this year. But I also know this about the donor is that they're giving much bigger gifts to the college they went to, this other organization in the area. They're giving pretty large 6-figure gifts. That's where I want to take this donor. I can already tell that this donor is really resonant about this program of ours. If I can do a really good job of cultivating this donor over time, I would think that in 3 years from now, I could ask for a 6-figure gift. That's the kind of thinking you need to do about your donors.
You know, Jeff, that reminds me, I worked with an MGO, and this is a perfect time of year to talk about this, because summertime's a great time to sit and look at your caseload and think about, okay, what 3 to 5 donors could I really think through deeply? And so I worked with an MGO, and every week she's like, I am determined to get my 5 people and really think about this. And because she set that intention, she started paying attention. She started really researching them, talking to people that knew them.
Yeah.
Within 6 months, she had a donor giving, I think at first was 3 million, and then it went up to like 9 million over time. And it was just because she started putting the puzzle pieces together, finding the passion, finding the history, and just created this beautiful relationship with this donor that the donor would have kept giving her, I think it was like 15,000 a year. If she hadn't just stopped and said, I'm going to choose 5 people that it really makes sense and start digging in. So I highly recommend doing that.
That's what it's all about. Right there.
A question from Suzanne: how much do you take into consideration the wealth indicator when you're making goals and plans for donors?
It's helpful information to help in goal setting, so you understand their capacity. It's helpful in tiering donors when you know that information. It also can be helpful as far as putting them in caseload pools at times. What rank would you put them into a pool of donors to try to qualify into a portfolio? So all that information is good information to help you know the donor better, outside of actually meeting with the donor and finding that out yourself. So having that information is helpful. But again, wealth indicator analysis information is about half right, and it shouldn't be taken as gospel. But it can be helpful in helping you understand what the potential capacity is for a donor.
Okay, maybe one more question here. Andrew's asking about how are you holding major gift officers accountable? What systems do you set up, and how do you do that as a leader?
Yeah, so we have what we call the donor engagement plan. Remember I said that we have a goal and a plan for every donor? So think of a big spreadsheet. All the donors down one side and all the months of the year on the top side. And every donor every month has a plan. What are they doing that month for it? So we have that for every major gift officer that we work with. They have a goal when it's going to come in, revenue, and a plan to achieve that goal. And then we meet with that major gift officer every week to ensure that the major gift officer basically is doing this. Did you do what you said you were going to do last week? And then we talk about that. And then we say, okay, what's the plan for next week? Here's what we're going to do with donors. Here's some strategy with this donor. I would do this. How are you going to ask this donor? All these questions. So that is how we keep major gift officers accountable. They have a plan, a goal, and then we meet with them every week to ensure that they're staying focused and accountable, and that they're getting the encouragement that they need, because a lot of major gift officers are kind of out there on their own, and their managers are not really spending a bunch of time with them, encouraging them, cheerleading for them, and giving them great strategy to help them do their job better.
Thank you, Jeff. I've just put in the chat box a link to our free donor value assessment, and also to what you just talked about, our donor engagement plan, if you all are interested.
Awesome.
So I think that's good for questions. Any last bit of advice to close this out, Jeff? Thank you so much for this great webinar.
I would encourage everyone to take advantage of this free donor assessment. There's no obligation, but it will reveal how your donors are performing. It's a new, different way of looking at your donor file. And I guarantee you, because I just did this yesterday, like I said, for this organization, they were absolutely blown away by what they found about the value attrition that was going on in their file. They had no idea. They'd grown by 53% over the last 4 years. Yet they were losing millions of dollars to value attrition that they didn't know they were losing. And so it was a huge eye opener for them. And we had a great conversation, and they had so much tremendous ability. And so it was a fun presentation, because not only did they have great donors, but they had so much more potential. And that's the great story. And that's what they wanted to find out. So I want to do that for you. So take advantage of that, because you're going to find out some great stuff about your file.
I love that, Jeff. It's like, you have that niggle that you don't quite have your arms around something quite right. This lays it all out so clear.
That's exactly what they said to me. They said, we know we were growing, but we also felt like we probably aren't growing like we could, and that there were donors falling through the cracks. And that's exactly what the data revealed to them. So they were like, okay, now we have the ammunition we need to expand and invest in this program.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you so much, Jeff, for the great presentation. The links are there in the chat box if you're interested in the donor assessment. Remember, we don't need your donor names, just the ID number to help you track them back down, and we can work with you to make that happen. Thank you, Jeff, so much. And thank you all for joining.
Thank you.